Sure. Well, thanks, Phoenix. And hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us for this week's webcast. This is actually the second of the season where we're focusing on art, ecology, and conservation. And if this sort of thing is your jam and you missed Daniela Molnar's presentation back in October, I'd encourage you to check out our YouTube channel and give it a watch. So yeah, I am Rob Clavins. I'm the Northeast Oregon Field Coordinator for Oregon Wild. And though I'm based in Wallowa County near the town of Enterprise, I'm joining you tonight from Walla Walla, where I'm meeting with some local community leaders that are trying to protect their watershed from industrial logging. I'm thrilled that tonight we're going to be joined by Bobby Fossick and Brosnan Spencer of Caretakers of the Land and Robin Coen, a board member of Greater Hells Canyon Council. You guys just heard from my colleague Phoenix, who also manages our digital communications, and she's going to be running things on the back end. Really thankful to have her on standby in case we have technical challenges, which we've had a few on my end. So she's here to back me up. So I've known Robin for years in her role as a board member of Greater Hells Canyon Council, and she's also become a good friend. GHCC, as they're better known, is one of our most reliable and effective partners. They formed a few years before Oregon Wild in a successful effort that was led by Brock Evans and other conservation legends to stop the last dams in Hells Canyon, which makes GHCC, as far as I can tell, the oldest conservation organization in the state. Our connection to GHCC goes back to our roots as the Oregon Wilderness Coalition and our work with a citizens group that I think had the best acronym of all time, which was Maintain Eastern Oregon Wilderness, or MEOW, which I just think is great. So Robin is an award-winning and self-taught watercolor artist. Though she currently lives in Boise, she's got deep roots in Northeast Oregon. She finds inspiration at her family home at the Good Bear Ranch on the flanks of the Elkhorn Mountains near Baker City. Robin founded GHCC's Artist in Residence program, or Wild Blues Air, in 2024. And along with another tremendous conservation advocate and friend of both organizations, author Marina Richie, they were the first to participate. Robin is going to do a little bit more thorough introduction of our next presenters, Brosnan Spencer and Bobby Fossick, who were last year's artists and operate as caretakers of the land. I first bumped into Bobby and Brosnan on the Zumwalt Prairie during a First Foods gathering event hosted by the Wallowa Land Trust. And unfortunately, the place we were stationed had been overrun by crickets. So my job was simply to sit by the side of the road and tell gatherers to find them down the road in a better spot. I did get to see them do a presentation at a GHCC event last fall with their daughter Meadow, and was just so taken by their work and ethos that I was eager for them to reach more people. And I'm just extremely grateful for all of our presenters for both the work that they do and also for taking the time to chat with us tonight. As you're all likely painfully aware, things are challenging for the environment right now. Art in our country is also being censored, defunded, used as propaganda. Indigenous communities are being marginalized and harmed, and anybody whose core values, include justice, freedom, compassion, or love are feeling the weight of the world right now. But just like those plants of the prairie have deep roots that make them resilient to the disturbance of those millions of crickets, I think we are resilient too, and we can come back stronger than ever. And part of why I believe that is because I know the power of being in community together. So I'm just really excited to spend this evening focusing on creativity, beauty, and our relationships with each other and our non-human relatives with whom we share this incredible place. Following our guests, I'll give some very brief comments about our work, and then we'll dive right into a question and answer session. And just adding to what Phoenix said earlier, I want to note that we often get a flood of questions right at the very end of the presentation. So please don't hesitate to submit your questions in the Q&A link as soon as you have them. The sooner you get them in, the easier it is for us to organize, ask, and answer them. We are recording this program. The video will be posted on our YouTube channel and our website, OregonWild.org, in the resource section. And we'll send a link to all of you as soon as we get those posted. If you purchased a raffle ticket, thank you. Your support allows us to continue hosting these presentations and advocate for the waters, wild places, and wildlife that make Oregon such a special place. We will be doing that raffle. It will be open through the evening. So if after the presentation you decide you want to enter, you can do that by finding this event on our website. Winners will be selected tomorrow and contacted by email to verify your shipping address. Along with a ton of familiar names and a really impressive showing from Wallowa County, I'm thrilled tonight to see a lot of unfamiliar names for this presentation. So if you're new to us, just briefly want to introduce you to Oregon Wild. We are a statewide conservation group focused on safeguarding Oregon's wildlands, wildlife, and waters as an enduring legacy for future generations. Last year, we celebrated our 50th anniversary, and while we've grown in recent years, we remain a grassroots organization and rely on really passionate people to be a part of our work by supporting us and our partners financially for sure, but also with your voices. So with that, I'm excited to hand things off to Robin Coen.
Okay, next slide, please. Yeah. I'm just waiting for, there we go. Thank you very much. This is a beautiful photo taken by Renee Patrick of Hawkins Pass, which is part of our area of interest, area of coverage. As I said, or as Rob said, I'm on the board of Greater Hills Canyon Council. Have been doing that for about 10 years. And he gave a little bit of background on GHCC, so I won't go into any more of that. But since saving Hell's Canyon, which was the big deal that got us started, and then also further advocacy that we participated in resulted in the creation of the Hell's Canyon National Recreation Area. So a lot of focus on that. We have in the last decade or so evolved to expand our region of protection to the Blue Mountains Bioregion, which includes Northeast Oregon, a little piece of Southwest Washington, and Western Idaho. And one of the reasons, next slide, please. One of the reasons why this area is so critical, because if you live in Portland or you live on the west side, you may not even have ever been to Northeast Oregon. But it is a bioregion that is critically important because it's the only, this slide is not showing, or at least I can't see it. But anyway, this shows the migration corridors, and it shows that there's kind of a bottleneck that goes, there we go, that goes through the Blue Mountains area. That connects, it's kind of an H. One side of the H is the Rocky Mountains, the other side is the Cascades. And then you have Northeast Oregon, which provides connectivity between those two major areas. And it's the only area of connectivity in south of the Canadian border. So very, very critical. Next slide, please. And another reason that this area is so important is because it's simply an area of great opportunity. You'll see that there's a lot of green up there. That means that much of the area is already at least partially protected as national forest, and we also have 7 wilderness areas. The sparse population means that there are still large tracts of land that have not already been encumbered by heavy development. So there is opportunity. There is still something that we can save. So I started, you can go to the next slide, I think. Greater Hills Canyon Council and I started the Wild Blues Artist in Residence program in 2023 because we were looking for new ways to engage with the community and bring them in to work with us around the topics of environmental conservation. Art speaks to people in a way that intellectual or political discussions simply can't do. It speaks to our hearts, and it has the power to inspire change. We can all read the news and figure out that change needs to happen, but somewhere along the line, you have to find the fire in your belly to go out and do something. So that is where we look to art. We decided to do the first year of the Artist in Residence as kind of a trial run with myself and as a watercolor artist, and Marina Richie, who is an award-winning nature writer. We chose the theme of Refugia of the Blue Mountains because it speaks to the possibility of what we can have or what we can save more overtly than it talks about what we are losing. We can create a refuge to sustain wildlife and human life through a period of deeply disruptive climate change. So I created the paintings, and Marina wrote the poetic narrative to accompany the artwork and kind of explain what was going on. She actually wrote a poem to go with this piece called Totem of Vanishing Souls. I'm not going to read the poem because it's a little bit long, but these are all species that are threatened or endangered, and they're all species that are native to our region, except for the polar bear. I always have to explain that. When I was doing this, I wanted something white at the bottom, and I wanted something substantial. And I also wanted something that was iconic. Everyone knows that the polar bear is endangered because of warming temperatures. And so I felt that that kind of set the tone for the rest. Environmentalists, most of them would know these other species are threatened or endangered, but a lot of people just coming to look at an art show wouldn't necessarily relate to that piece. Next slide, please. And this is called Swimming the Gauntlet. And I named that because it's kind of what I imagine salmon feel like when they're trying to return to their spawning grounds in cold, clear headwaters. And they've got to navigate these warm slack waters and dams and motorized boating and just mud and silt and all kinds of things that they shouldn't have to navigate in order to reproduce. Next slide, please. And this last painting that I'm going to show you is called Architects of Refugia. And we all know that, or we have come to understand in the last decade or two, that beavers play a really critical role in restoring healthy rivers and streams and holding water in the landscape. So you can see the beavers down in front. And one thing that's a little different about this painting is it's messy. I don't know if it would hold up very well under a standard art critique, but I wanted to make it messy on purpose because that's really how the landscape's supposed to look. That's a healthy landscape, and that's a landscape where a beaver would be happy and where you would get lots of nice, clear, cold water that would stay within the landscape. And you can see more of my paintings as well as a book containing Marina's narrative at my website, robincoenart.com. And we plan to continue traveling this exhibit around the area as opportunities arise. And just FYI, all proceeds from purchases of these paintings will be contributed to GHCC's conservation work. So finally, I would like to, let's move to the next slide. Yeah, I was looking for the Caretakers logo on there, but I think they'll have it up. There it is. We chose Caretakers of the Land as our first real artist in residence for 2025. And we selected them because their project portrays a deep interconnectedness of all life in the Blue Mountains. They demonstrate a way of being in the world that can serve as a spiritual and cultural guide to living in partnership with the earth. Caretakers of the Land is led by Cayuse, Umatilla, Walla Walla natives, and it focuses on revitalizing culturally significant arts, crafts, and lifeways of the Mid-Columbia River Basin and the Blue Mountain Bioregion. Those include natural basketry, hide tanning, and traditional foodways. So without further ado, I would like to present Bobby Fossick and Brosnan Spencer at Caretakers of the Land.
Hello. We're just getting our PowerPoint. Can I do it really quick? There we go. Okay. All right.
Okay, hello everybody. My name's Bobby Fossick. This is Brosnan. We're caretakers of the land. We're all caretakers of the land in our natural state of being when we live, the way that we were intended to live. Just the byproduct of our living is stewardship of the land and management. So that's kind of where that name comes from. Not that we manage a whole bunch of huge restoration projects or, but that we're all caretakers of the land when we're living in relationship with it. And so we serve to steward and strengthen the cultural and natural lifeways of the Blue Mountain Bioregion. And we do this through seasonal round immersion camps and activities all throughout the year, as well as habitat restoration in a grassroots level. This is a picture of a camas at Lad Marsh.
All right, yeah. So we put this PowerPoint presentation together to just kind of give you a visual of what we do. Living in 2026, living with the land as deeply as we can in this modern time, gathering our foods, gathering our medicines, and working deeply in cultural revitalization to help bring back things like hide tanning, first food gathering, helping people identify, gather, cook, preserve our first foods and medicines, basket weaving, all the different things. This is a slide of my daughter and I gathering Lomatium couch out by Buckhorn Lookout. And this is our root camp. So we're out here in the springtime. After we've had feast, we have a ceremony at our longhouse at the Nikiawe Longhouse near Pendleton on the Umatilla Indian Reservation. And then after we do our ceremonies and have feast, then we're released, as well as the community, to go out and gather our foods for the year. So when they're on, the foods don't wait for us. And so this is in the springtime, and so then we'll be gathering for the whole year. This here is our digging stick that we gather with. I don't know if you can see my mouse. I think you can. It's called a cup-in, and this is a wuppus for the roots basket that I made. So some of our spring foods, like I said, we focus on how to harvest, process, cook, and preserve for the year and help our native community do the same. This is a yellow bell, one of our spring foods. Here's some more. This is a latit, and we're going to be having our celery feast this Sunday and be honoring this food here. And then the rest of the community will be able to go out and gather. And then we have some violets, khamsi, anipush, all of our spring foods that we like to focus on. And then the next feast is our root feast, which we probably like in a month or so. And these are the 3 roots that we gather and have our ceremonies for. So this is piache, luksh, and couch. So some lomatiums, some bitterroot. This is us making what's called suplil, and it's root cookies. And this can be a variety of things from lomatium couch, we call it couch, huckleberries, service berries. You can add dried meat. You make them more sweet or make them more savory. These were like the first energy bars packed with meat and berries. They can give you energy. They'll be dried in your pouch, and a lot of times people would take them to hunt and just be able to sustain themselves for a long time out there. So a lot of the foods that we gather, the roots and the berries, we dry them. Here's some of the baskets that I've made for our roots, and here's a variety of roots here. During our root camp that we just gathered and gonna eat that day. So that was all the spring. That was a glimpse of some of the spring roots. There's so many out there. This is a glimpse of our summer roots that we focus on. So we have Chumash, which is camas, Nunas, the Mariposa lily bulbs, and then the Sowit. Some of the roots, some of the medicines for teas on the mountain that we gather. This is a glimpse of our camas bake. Once the camas is, we cook the camas in what's called a tumiched, and it's an earth oven. And we have all these different layers that we cook it in the ground. And when the camas comes out, um, it looks like this, and it's sweet, like chocolate kind of vibe, smoky, really good. Camas is one of the plants that have protein, a good amount of protein in them. So this is one of the things that we've also um, been working on bringing back, remembering how to, the art of cooking in the ground once again. This was our Tule camp this summer. We have it at the Ascension School in Cove, Oregon, and we go and gather our Tule at Lad Marsh. And we do that every year. It's awesome. We have a great relationship with Lad Marsh and the Ascension School. So this is our group this last summer. We went and got the tulies and we're bringing them back and showing people how to take care of them. So what we do is we gather the tulies and then we cure them and they're dried and ready. And then that's what we make the mats out of. And then the people that come to our class, they gather and then they can take home what they gather and let it continue to take care of it to cure it. And then they make the tule mats and get to take them home. So the tule reeds are made into the mats, and they're a really important plant. They're used in every single ceremony. There's a tule mat used. So there's many uses for them. A long time ago, before we had tables, they were laid on the floor and sat on. Our foods were on them. Before there was canvas teepees, we had tule mats layering our teepees. 3 layers makes it waterproof. When the water hits it, it expands. And then in the summertime, they shrink and create ventilation. So just overall, really great cover for your lodge. But there's just so many other uses for tule mats. And so it's a big need to know how to make tule mats for your family or for your community. And so this is one of our offerings that we do. All of our classes so far have been for free, because we've gotten donations, grants and donations and things like that to be able to put these classes on. This is just a class that I had in the past. Where was that? The island? Somewhere near Portland area, Sabi Island, I think it's called. But yeah, this is one of the class. All those people were gonna do namings, and we're getting things ready for their ceremonies. We teach medicine making classes. Here's a few pictures of our elderberry syrup class and wound salve classes for our Native community. Some of them were at Yellowhawk, some of them were with the family engagement program. We do after school. The after school program on our reservation has a summer camp. And so we're making sup lil and tule mats and talking about our first foods, things like that. There's another class over, I'm doing teas and just telling the children about the different herbs and then letting them make their own blend and just letting them explore other drinks than, what they might be used to, the world of teas. And then we go into our berry camp after summer. The summer camp will go into our berry camp where we gather huckleberries, service berries, choke cherries, currants, and then later our elderberries for medicine. And again, showing this is an opportunity for our Native community to come out and learn how to harvest, process, cook, and preserve their berries for the year. There's a basket that I made. It's made from cedar roots. And then we got our berries on our drying rack during our camp. There's some of the ways that we process our foods. And then just wanted to show some different ways to cook our first foods. Food is medicine, our stews, herbs, berries, roots. And then in the fall, we go into our hide tanning camp. We've actually been doing our hide tanning camp in March, but we're gonna move it to October. And so we also do that at the Ascension School. And we teach 6 hides a year. We teach with 6 hides a year to different families that want to sign up. And it's 5 days long. And we go all the way to smoked hides, and they get to take home what they made from like a wet, sloppy hide all the way worked into a soft, smoky, beautiful hide that they can take home. Here's just more pictures of hide camp, and someone had got home and like right away busted out this baby buckskin dress for their granddaughter like right away. So that was really inspiring. But yeah, it's a good time. Here's just a few other things that I've made with the buckskin pants, pouches, that dress that my daughter is wearing, and her moccasins. This is our cedar root excursion where we go and gather cedar roots, usually like along the Sandy River. This is for basketry. This is our elder Ramona Cayona, and I'm one of the lead teachers as well. And we use the cedar root to put our berries in. So these are for berry baskets. And before there was pots, cedar root woven tight enough, it can hold water. And so you fill that basket with water, you get your rocks hot on the fire, you put the rocks in your basket, and you have sticks with your foods. And that was our pots in the past, and we'd cook in the baskets. But now with our tribe, it's for berries. So this is one of our classes where we're breaking down the root into ribbons to coil into cedar root baskets on our Umatilla Indian Reservation. All right, Bobby.
And what you see here is the sticks, the fibers, the inner bark and the outer bark, and then the processed fibers, and then the cordage, eventual cordage of dogbane hemp, what we call tachus, and a couple of the bone and antler tools we use to clean the outer bark from the inner bark. That's something that the dogbane hemp, by a lot of modern land managers, it's treated as a weed because when it's green, it has a toxicity for livestock. But it's also to repel them from eating it. So, and that same chemical, as it goes dormant, kind of transforms, and it helps to keeps away bugs and mold and bacteria and rodents, and so it makes for a really strong and soft string that you can make into rope, fish nets, and root baskets, and then that also helps to preserve your food and to keep things out of it. And so that's something we've been working to. One of our main areas of focus of revitalization is where to find it, and how to process it and how to use it. It's something that not very many people do, since we've had to embrace this fast-paced world. There's a rope I made, draped over some plants in the summer growth. There's the basket that we did as a part of the artist in residence. We worked together as a family to process the dog bane down from a lot of locations and to get it into cordage, and then for Brosnan to start weaving it into a basket. And this is a plant that grows in a wide variety of areas. It can grow in dry to marshy areas, but it prefers moist areas that are well drained, and it's also uh, can transmute toxins in the soil and help clean the soil. So it's one of my areas of interest is trying to encourage it to be used for soil remediation and restoration, as well as for fiber uses. And the pollinators, it's good for the pollinators. And it's a really special plant that's been villainized the last couple hundred years. One of our areas of focus is our, older ways of transportation as well, as a way of, getting around, but also connection with each other, connection with the water, strengthening, team building, and a way for us to take youth and families and ourselves and go and reconnect to ancestral waterways and village sites and to have fun and to fish and eventually gather and that sort of thing. So right now, we've been kind of planning and preparing for years, learning from the few people that are out there making dugout canoes. But our focus right now is how to carve and utilize Columbia River style dugout canoes, inland style. So right now, this is a tree that was deemed a hazard by the Wallowa Lake State Park. It was on their list of potential hazard trees that would need to be removed. And so we've been communicating with them for a while that whenever the next time they have one that's going to be removed, that we would like to carve it into a canoe. Because a lot of our old canoes were cottonwood or pine that would come down the river, or different various opportunistic ways of getting a log. And so we're using a black cottonwood, which is also one of the main riparian trees of our region. And all over the world, poplars are along every river and a super important habitat tree for fish and all life of this region. And so that's the log, and we've been gradually whittling it down and sculpting the canoe out of it. This is the stern end, and with that knot, it's been kind of looking like a sturgeon when it's upside down, interestingly enough. And so we have a crew of people that comes occasionally for a few days at a time to help us, and they are just a group of canoe enthusiasts and raft guides, river people that learned how to, taught themselves how to make dugouts and then travel in them. And that eventually led them to meeting various Columbia River tribes and bands up and down the river and helping them to revitalize and bring back our canoes. And so they're helping us to do the same thing right now. And so we're carving at the head of Wallowa Lake, a cottonwood dugout. It's a little more recent. We're getting snow now, but this was just a couple days ago before the snow came. Now we got almost a foot of snow, and we're still been out there carving. This was from a couple weeks back. OPB came out and has started making a little video about it. So we got the heart of the canoe of the tree out to prevent the rest of it from cracking and starting to shape it up. And today we made a lot of progress, and the outside of it is really getting close to complete, and then we'll turn it over and finish the inside. This is some of our crew and some of their family, and just a bunch of people from all over that love the canoes and love water. And And so we're bringing, our idea with this canoe is it's going to serve to, you know, we do a lot of youth camps and things like that. So we're going to, have paddles here at the lake, get our youth out as much as we can, get families out, and as well as go join some of the intertribal paddles on the Columbia and the Snake, and just kind of keep bringing our canoes back, having races, having things to look forward to, trips on the water together, and, paddle events. We're starting to do a regular paddle here at Wallowa Lake in July, coinciding with the Tamclick celebration. So that's our current project. And just kind of feeling it's a lot of information we're sharing, and just to put it out there that we share this information, especially in this where we're bridging between organizations with the intention of conservation of the Blue Mountain Bioregion, that it's not an encouragement, necessarily to go out and just forage these foods or materials, and definitely not to commercialize or exploit them, but to grow a respect for our foodways and our lifeways, and to let people know that we still, there's a lot of us still holding a presence in these ways, and that we could use allies and support in helping us to get back to these ways, in ways such as this, and, working with landowners to gain access to our foods, and to find ways that we can come together to protect them, preserve them, and restore them in areas they've been depleted, and destroyed or removed from. And so finding that common ground, and, if you feel compelled, we do what we can with, mostly donations and grants, and we bring in some income helping with outdoor schools and things like that. And so a little goes a long way to help us in our projects. Right now, we're currently fundraising. Some of our main focus is to help us finish out this canoe carving project. We've gotten grants so far from Wild Horse Foundation, Tau First Foods Fund, and Bisbee Foundation. We were donated a bull elk tag from the Zumwalt Nature Conservancy of Zumwalt Prairie, and that's really helped us to get our tools and our equipment, and to help pay to get our carvers out here to consult and help guide us as we're also learning still. So now we're in the phase of just trying to make sure we have what we need to host and support paddles the rest of the year, and to have camps where we can, get people out on the water in the landscape, and to work together with other organizations. And so to wrap it up, I will read, to go along with our artists in residence, we did a little story that kind of goes with the theme of the Refugia of the Blues. So since time immemorial, the Refugia of the Blue Mountains has offered habitat, home, and hearth to countless life forms, including the human beings. Through many major cataclysms, cyclic shifts, and changes, the lives that dwell here have survived, adapted, and renewed themselves and the land. Before the human beings, the salmon and all the aquatic species were already here. The deer and all those of the land and the sky were already here. The bitterroot and all the many celeries and roots were already here. The huckleberry and all the many other berries and fruits were already here. The many varieties of medicine plants were already here. The dogbane hemp, the tule reeds, the willows, and all the many other material plants were already here. The giver of all life, the water, was already here, pumping and flowing through the veins of the earth and the sky. Upon the arrival of the infant like humans, each of these beings stood up, named themselves and their parts, and the order and ways in which they give life. They sacrificed of themselves and placed their voices and their willpower into the people. In exchange, the human beings are bound to always take care of the land, the water, and all the many forms of life, or suffer the consequences. Never take more than is needed. Always give back. Allow time for rest and replenishment. Speak for them when the time comes that this covenant is being broken. And by honoring this ancient law of relationship and reciprocity, the human societies of the Blue Mountain Ecoregion have thrived for thousands of years while adapting to many drastic changes, just as the many seen and unseen organisms and life forms of this landscape have. In the current state of humanity that we find ourselves in, we continue to turn towards these relationships to guide us through. And I'll end it on that note right there. So just thanking you for your time, thanking you for listening to me and us, and yeah, we just look forward to continuing to find ways that we can bridge our gaps and work together for a better future for our children, our grandchildren, for this landscape. Because it's these big corporations, these commercializing interests, these industries that we're up against. And so if we can find ways to work together and ally, I'm for that. So thank you.
Thank you yeah, thank you guys very much, and we're proud and thankful to have you with us and sharing your message. We haven't had much of a winter, but those photos are making me pretty eager for the greens and the purples and the yellows that are on their way. I do hope that folks will consider supporting Caretakers, and if you missed the links, you can find them on the recording tomorrow. And I do just want to remind folks that after I just talk for a minute or two, we will finish out the evening with some questions and answers. So if you haven't already, don't forget to put your questions in the Q&A box and stick around. But first, I do just want to briefly encourage you to use your voice for the wildlife, functioning forests, and clean cold waters of our state. I fear that as Bobby just left us with, many of us are failing in the responsibilities we have. But in particular, I do want to impress upon you the importance of the often overlooked communities and landscapes of Eastern Oregon and the Blue Mountains ecoregion. It really is an incredible corner of an astoundingly incredible planet. And here in Northeast Oregon, we know it has been home to people since time immemorial and no less than 16,000 years. And in fact, for a time, I think the oldest known physical evidence of people in North America was here in the Hells Canyon region. And I like to tell people that this is really a landscape of superlatives. Hell's Canyon is North America's deepest river canyon. It's home to prickly pear cactus and ancient sturgeon and rattlesnakes. And well, that fits with a lot of people's vision of Eastern Oregon as a place of high desert with sagebrush and juniper and maybe a few dry ponderosa pine forests like you see in Central Oregon. There's a fair bit of that, but a raven or a red-tailed hawk or a California condor flying the thermals from the canyons would only have to fly a couple of miles to reach those snow-capped peaks and the alpine meadows that as recently as a few decades ago had glaciers in them. And along the way, you'd be crossing just this incredibly, impossibly complex and diverse landscape with grasslands and wetlands and forests. And in fact, Eastern Oregon actually has more acres of forest than Western Oregon. And there are places here in the Blues where if you didn't know any better, you might think you were in the Coast Range or the wet Cascades. And as we heard from Robin, these forested landscapes are a critical and irreplaceable connection between the Rocky Mountains, the Cascades, and the landscapes beyond. And we saw with wolves like OR7 or Journey, they made their journey back to Oregon from central Idaho and all the way to California following those ancient pathways. And, in this age of climate change and development, the connections are just more important than ever. If we want to see species like wolverine or grizzly bear, pika, the little things like terrestrial mollusks have a chance to thrive into the future, these landscapes are truly of the utmost importance. And briefly, I do want to note that we'll actually be doing a webcast on grizzly bears in Oregon, featuring a local naturalist and Nez Perce elder on March 25th. The world is facing an extinction crisis, and it's not just faraway places. In its most recent update, the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife increased the number of species tagged as being of greatest conservation concern to well over 300. And I don't want to be a bummer, but let that sink in. Even here in the green state of Oregon, generally ignored species like porcupine are struggling. Ancient mussel beds are being smothered by runoff from logging projects. And in some headwater streams, only a few dozen native salmon are returning to their redds each year. And even far away from dams and industry and that dense development, we see songbirds that were once common and insects in decline. And I promise it won't all be, I'll finish on a positive note, but under this administration, our public lands agencies are proposing bigger and more aggressive logging projects. They're calling them restoration, and they're doing it with less public input and less analysis, and in some cases, essentially none. We've been building relationships on trust and collaboration, and those relationships are being gutted as the staff that remain are under pressure to get the cutout at all costs, increase livestock grazing, and not be seen as appeasing conservationists or even being nice to us. And I won't go into every threat we're facing. Instead, I just again want to ask you to consider supporting groups like Oregon Wild, Greater Hills Canyon Council, Caretakers of the Land, and others who support your values. And again, financially if possible, but please do sign up for our means of communication, like our email lists. And if you do, it won't be long until you hear about the Blue Mountain Forest Plan revisions. These are plans that are going to decide the fate of these forests for generations. The agency has spent years working exclusively with entities aligned with extractive interests and appear intent on gutting any enforceable protections for water and wildlife. So when you get that alert, please take action. It's easy to get caught up with all the doom and gloom and feel overwhelmed, and I encourage you to take care of yourselves, including taking breaks from it. But please don't fully disengage. We need to continue to fight back. But as we've seen here tonight, and with artists like Daniela, who was with us a few weeks ago, and Patagonia, there can be joy in resistance. Despite decades of mistreating our non-human relations, we still have these incredible opportunities and values worth protecting. And I would argue that the forested landscapes of Eastern Oregon are some of the greatest conservation opportunities in the lower 48. And last but not least, I just would be remiss not to mention a really massive and timely priority. I mentioned the decline of wildlife in our state, and a proposal called 1.25% for wildlife will be voted on tomorrow in the Oregon House of Representatives before hopefully moving on to the Senate. If, and I like to say when passed, the bill is going to increase lodging taxes by a really modest 1.25%. It will keep it the third lowest in the country, and it would fund programs for non-game wildlife conservation, anti-poaching efforts, and more. And as a lodge owner myself, I know our guests, occasionally grumble about their taxes on their bill, but it doesn't affect whether or not they want to come to visit. What does affect whether they not want to come and visit our wildlife, our public lands, that are valuable on their own merits, but also a massive part of that decision. Unfortunately, a small number of lobbyists opposed to the tax, which mostly is paid by visitors, recreation in our state, are fighting against it, despite really incredible support from the conservation community, hunters and anglers, and even interests with whom we often find ourselves at odds. So please consider picking up the phone, calling your state senator, telling them to support 1.25% for wildlife. So anyway, these are challenging times, but our speakers tonight, and all of you that I can only see as names on the screen are really a massive part of what keeps me going, inspires me, keeps all of us going. So Robin, Brosnan, Bobby, everyone who's listening and watching, thank you so much. And with no further ado, I will get out of the way, see if we can get to some questions. And given my technical challenges, I'm going to let Phoenix manage that pretty much in its entirety. So thank you, everybody.
Okay. Well, first, just to start, I'd like to say several of the questions are just like, no questions. Thank you so much. We appreciate everybody sharing everything. And then there was one question I just want to address that I'm sure a lot of people are going to have. It was generally asking about how to find Robin's art or how to contact people. I will be sending out an email tomorrow with a recording of this, and I'm going to link it to everybody's website so you can find those donation links to Caretakers of the Land. You can find Robin's artwork. So you guys will be getting a copy of this video and all of like the follow-up materials and stuff. So you don't have to worry about hurrying and taking notes really fast or like asking us to flip back through slides. Okay, so one of the first questions was about your baskets. And I know you mentioned cedar roots, but people were curious if cedar roots is what you were using for all of your baskets.
I use a variety of materials. Like Bobby was saying, traditionally our baskets are made from dog bane hemp, which we did make a basket this summer. Oh, they're called wuppuses, and they're 4 roots. And we did get to learn how to make one of those. But a lot of there's a lot of weavers on my reservation, and which is great. And a lot of times we use hemp and yarn or wool, and then line it with buckskin, and then a lot of people put a liner inside as well. to gather the roots. And then, yeah, the cedar root baskets traditionally are cooking pots and huckleberries. Yeah.
Okay, cool. There were also a couple questions about the dog bane specifically. So since that came up, one person wanted to know if it was a specific species of dog bane that you were using. And I think they're probably curious about the Western name, is what I'm going to assume that question is getting at.
Yeah, it's like common dogbane hemp, Epoxynum cannabinum. Sounds like I'm casting a spell.
All
But
those
that's how
Latin
you
names too.
pronounce it, something like that. Epoxynum cannabinum. Yeah.
Okay, great, thank you. And then one person, and I did have to Google this word. They wanted to know more about the phytomediation of dogbane, and I looked it up for everyone who is like me, who is in the audience, who had to look it up, and just about the how it can clear toxins out of the soil and landscape around it. I didn't know if anyone knew much more about it.
Yeah. Well, I'm still learning about that aspect of it, like on a real technical level, but yeah, it draws pollutants, heavy metals and things out of the soil, which is also, we're wanting to kind of understand that more also for using the fibers. Like, obviously you don't want to use fibers that are contaminated, but then, just things like how much do they pull out? What can you do with those fibers to then, help heal the soil, and what kind of chemicals and toxins it is actually pulling out? Because it's a bioaccumulator. Bioaccumulator is the what I've heard it called. And so it will pull things out of the soil in that way. So, and it also is spreads from rhizomes, so it can hold banks together. So, and one of the things we're facing, so much industry is in riparian zone, and so it's what kind of plants, how can we move some of that out of riparian zones, and what kind of plants can we use to heal that soil and begin the restoration process and the healing of those areas? And I think most of our native plants are kind of the key to that. So
Yeah. Oh my gosh, thank you. I learned a bunch about that today. That's really cool. I also I'm putting in my own questions here, but it was great to hear you talk about how people view it as like a weed and like something to get rid of, and that's just like such a weird way to think about the landscape of like what you can get out of it instead of what it's, meant to do. But
yeah.
so I appreciated you sharing that. Okay, someone was curious when you guys are foraging your first foods, is there still enough available? They were curious about the scarcity or an abundance of being able to find these first foods for these gatherings.
Again, it depends, every food is different, have their own protocols and have their own, we have to develop a relationship with each one. And some it's kind of like they need help with fire. They're diminishing because of lack of fire, or the lack of people digging them in the proper way, at the right time of year, timing. And then some things in certain areas are getting hammered pretty hard, and are in commercialized, such as huckleberries and other berries. So it really depends on the food, and obviously our salmon are hurting really bad and in decline, and we've lost, I think, three or four different species to extinction, as far as I know, and the rivers are just polluted. So it's a hard, fish being one of our main foods, where it's so contaminated and dwindling, from all the many attacks upon it. But so yeah, it really depends on which food, but a
Yeah.
lot of them we can find them.
Yeah. And then each tribe and the different territories are known for different foods. So like the Umatilla, Cayuse, Walla Walla, we're known for the couch. So when people come to our feasts, a lot of times they come for the couch, the Lamation couch. So we have an abundance of that, but it might be harder to gather the bitter root. I have to go out farther or go to multiple places to get an abundance of it. So yeah, it just depends on the food, like he's saying.
some of the foods and materials that are like, marsh plants, they're really prolific. Dogbane, tules, wapato, they're really prolific, but marshes and wetlands are just drained and manipulated, drastically everywhere, especially the Grand Ronde Valley, everywhere. And so that's one of the biggest threats is our marshes and wetlands being drained, diverted, streams being straightened out for miles, and you know, so it's a lot of different threats and things, depending on which food, and they're all interconnected. So
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Thank you for sharing. Um, Robin, why watercolors?
Oh, well, I just always loved watercolors, just I would see a painting I really loved, and frequently it was a watercolor. And it it's people say it's one of the harder mediums, but I haven't painted with oils or acrylics, so I don't really know. But it definitely takes a while to feel like you can sort of manage what's going on in the paper. But the flip side of that is what's really cool about them, and I call it my dance with the universe, because you really, you come put the water down, you do a sketch, and then or sketch, then the water, and then you start adding color, and things happen and mix and move around in ways that you had not expected at all. And I even emphasize that with the method of painting that I use, which is for a lot of my pieces, kind of depending on the composition and the colors, you can pour. So I'll pour like two primary colors and let them mix. And then I'll pour two other primary colors in a different area and let them mix. And then I kind of use that as my base. And then I work up the images from there. But so it's like I feel like I'm working with the universe. It's like a conversation. I really enjoy that.
Cool.
I want to say actually real quick, to you, Robin, but actually for the benefit of everybody listening, it's another plug for the webinar we did with Daniela a few months ago. She does art with pigments that she collects from rocks and plants and things from the landscape. And I think both Phoenix and I were just like awestruck when she talked about some of the magic that happens. I mean, it's hard to describe it any other way with those pigments. So really worth hearing that.
Yeah, I think I want to go out with her. I need to watch that and see if I can tag along on one of her collecting trips.
That's so funny. I was going to say we did get a lot of questions, but to be considerate of everyone's time, I was going to ask Robin one more question and then one more question generally about caretakers of the land. But the one more Robin question was someone wanted to know if you used any natural pigments or anything like that for your watercolors.
No, I don't. I mean, that's like a whole nother thing is you got to collect the material and then figure out how to make the pigments. But I did look at some of Daniela's work, and it's beautiful because the colors are really, they're very earthy and very nuanced. It's not, my paintings tend to be brighter colors, but I loved the just the way they look. They're just, I don't know. What can I say? Nuance. They just feel so natural and whole. So yeah, they're
Yeah.
really cool.
Yeah. And then for whoever asked that question on our website, and I'll plug it into the email afterwards, Danielle has a whole thing where she talks about how she gathers them. And some of them she uses ash. And it's really interesting the way they like interact with each other. And she has to be careful with that. Um, there was another question. Someone started first. They were talking about caretakers of the land and the events that you guys put on, and said they were so glad to see the youth, but they wanted to clarify that they mean you two. When they say youth, they're including you in that. They put that in parentheses. Teaching the old ways, and they wanted to know if you've ever partnered with the Nez Perce and the Walla homelands, and have you attended their first food gatherings each spring?
Um, as far as Nez Perce tribe or Nez Perce tribal members, we've done some partnership, where we've worked together, on bakes, Camas bakes, and Thule gathering trips with some different Nez Perce groups. And yeah, we've been connected with the Wallowa Homeland Project for last decade or so, fairly closely in the Wallowa Land Trust as well on that gathering. Brazen could talk more about that, but yeah, we've been loosely working with the Wallowa, Homeland Project, just mostly as they've supported us when we're in this area doing
Mhm.
different gatherings or, whatever we're doing over here, just always letting us, helping us out with camp in there or, and we go to the longhouse there as much as possible. Elliot, he's a maintenance person there. He's a friend of mine, and Olcott descendant and JC. Yeah, we all work pretty close together, and we're all pretty fairly close with one another. So, and we're looking forward to doing a lot more things together. We're helping with we're going to help, with a youth camp based out of the Homeland Return Project this summer, and different things like that on the horizon. So, yeah.
Okay, cool. And then last question I will say is shamelessly my own. Just because I knit, so I know how when you're processing fabrics or textiles of any kind, just especially for those of us that are like so embedded in like European-based and Western-based societies, we're so disconnected from how long it takes to make things. So I was curious for all of you, Robin too, with like an art piece of how long does it take to go from like harvesting to basket, and idea to paint. I just wanted to give people contextualize of like how much love and time is put into these projects.
I'll go first, but painting it really varies depending on how much detail is in there and how big it is. It can be, I don't know, and I'm slow. Well, I just do a lot of other things, but so I don't really know, but I don't know, 10 to 20 hours, for kind of an average size painting. And I also research the topic because I'm trying to communicate a message about the value of the wild landscapes or life. So I try to paint it in a way that feels right, like that that kind of represents what it is in the world. But I gotta say, with the baskets, I just made a little piece of dog bane cordage, and if people did that, there would be no throwaway society. That problem, plastics in the ocean, boom, gone.
Yeah, making the dog bane basket that we made this last year, every stalk has to be broken down and then it breaks into four and then there's just so many steps before you can even get to the point where you can start to twine it, make it into cordage and then and to twine it. So it's really hard to put a time on it because it's gathering time and then all the things. I honestly don't have a number of what it took for like a dog bane basket.
Yeah, and it's always one of the most common well, how long does it take, like on our canoe or on a hide or on a basket? And it's always so hard. And I also take those times as an opportunity to kind of get out of, my time bound thinking and to just kind of let go into the flow of what I'm working on and try to not be anxious about time or whatever and just kind of be with the process of wherever the process is at. But I've been trying to start doing things like bundling stock so I know how many stocks it takes to make something, but
Yeah.
it's hard to calculate from going out and gathering it to processing it to weaving it. And then there's, two or three of us just to get it down to the process of being able to weave with it. And
Yeah.
even being able to go buy it, if she were to buy materials from the store, hemp and yarn, a basket still takes quite a while. And that's part of it too, is like sometimes like people might not do this as a practice, but to grow that respect and appreciation. So, like, man, a piece of string is nothing to take for granted, and how much of our life is literally bound together by it and it had to come from somewhere. And, it might take us a long time. And if it doesn't take us a long time, it usually has a big consequence to it. And so,
Mm.
I'm trying to start adding up time and materials, but it's difficult to put a number on.
Yeah, then the cedar baskets, it's like you go and you dig the cedar root and then you split them down into like small ribbons and then they cure for a whole year. And then you start to weave with them. And then also to make designs and things like, I don't know if you saw the white on the basket, that's bear grass. So then the bear grass, each blade of each piece of bear grass has a blade on it. So every single blade needs to be cleaned to make the imbrication. And on a basket, the kind that I'm doing, the coiling, you just use the base of the grass. And then you can use the rest of it for other stuff, but it's just like, I mean, it's just so much processing. You got to really want it. But then those things last forever. Like that, I have a basket that's a cedar basket that's over 200 years old and it's still like really strong. And like the buckskin, it's like boot camp. It's fun, but it's a lot of work. And then but that buckskin can last. Like you can hand things down, to your grandchildren, your great grandchildren that will be like really proud of what they have. And so like these things live on for a long time. But yeah, we got to get better at like I think just casually timing ourselves and writing it down, that kind of stuff, because it's countless hours, really. You go timeless. It's in a different.
I was gonna say I like your philosophy of disconnecting from like the time though. I would say don't let me push my time question onto you and make you change your thought process there. Okay, I do want to acknowledge there's a ton of other questions, but I want to be conscious of everyone's time. And so I will be sending out a follow-up email tomorrow, and if any of your burning questions didn't get answered, please let me know. My email will be on there too if you have any other questions, and I can refer you to Rob or we can pass it on. So apologies we didn't get to everyone. There's a lot of questions on here, but I know not all of us can stay all night. So I will pass it off to Rob for any ending messages. And from me personally, and also the like 5 people that just said, thank you, thank you. Thank you guys for sharing everything with us.
Yeah, there's not too much to add other than thank you. This was great. I loved it, and I'm sorry we just can't keep going on, but I'm lucky enough to live near these guys. So sorry, you just opened up a whole ball of wax where I'm gonna come visit you at the canoe and ask some questions. So but yeah, so thanks to Robin, GHCC, to Brosnan, Bobby, and Caretakers, and everybody who joined us tonight. It is there. Remember, look out for a link to the recording. It's not too late to buy a raffle ticket if you want to. And again, just yeah, thank you everybody, and enjoy the rest of your night. Have a great evening.
Thank you. Have a
Yeah,
good night.
thank you all. See ya.